Hello and welcome to my big cosplay build for SakuraCon this year. I will be making Tecna's Harmonix fairy form from Winx Club for a group. So right now it is the end of December and SakuraCon is Easter weekend, which sounds like a lot of time, but I promise you it is not a lot of time. And I want the dress to be well fitted, to have a really good foundation. And maybe I don't have time to get to embellishments like rhinestones and beading, but I would like to have a very nice wearable foundation to this dress. Worst case scenario, hopefully it doesn't come to this, but worst case scenario, if all I can finish is this dress, I'm going to throw my Flora wings on the back and my season 1 Tecna wig on my head, and I'm going to find a pair of sparkly shoes, and I am going to call that Harmonix. Under this Winx sweater, I have the same design on a t-shirt. So here is the materials. This actually isn't even all of them. There's quite a lot for this build. I'm gonna get more into that later. For right now, I'm gonna focus mostly on patterning. Here is some muslin for me to drape the pattern. And not only am I going to drape my own pattern for the top, I'm gonna drape 2 patterns for the top. I would like 1 pattern for the lining and maybe a middle structural layer of the top. And I would like this pattern to be very simple, just side seams, back seams. Then I would like to make a second pattern for the outside layer because for whatever reason, her top has a billion squiggly different pieces. Tecna Harmonix mock-up attempt number 1. And I am wearing a shirt under this because unfortunately this mock-up cannot function as a shirt. This side I had to fiddle with a lot. There's a lot of extra pieces of fabric I just added in. And the reason for that is if you look at the side I haven't adjusted. My dress form, this one at least, is pretty close to my bust, waist, hip measurements. But what I am discovering is that the distance from the bust line to the top of the shoulders, apparently that distance for me is abnormally long. I didn't think that was a weird thing, but now I'm am I self-conscious about my clavicle? So I pretty much think I have to recut out almost every piece. I mostly just need to add stuff upwards. I do also think I need to make the cups just a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. Tecna Harmonix mock-up number 2. I added a whole bunch of seam allowance absolutely everywhere because the last one wasn't working, and now, in predictable Colleen fashion, it is way too big. Thankfully, this is something I can fix without having to cut everything out again. You can kind of see the issue. How am I messing up this much? I'm looking back on everything I've done for this costume this far, and I'm how am I doing so bad? I'm so ready to just ditch this whole project, but let's give it at least one more go making this mock-up fit. I could count on one hand the amount of times that I have started a cosplay project and a YouTube video and things have gone so wrong and been so frustrating that I've had to drop the entire project and video completely. And yesterday, Tecna Harmonix was dangerously close to joining that list. I have a working mock-up! Finally! I have a working mock-up. I can confirm that putting a zipper in the mock-up was a huge help. I probably had to try this on at least 12 different times yesterday. So some of the things that were really tripping me up, obviously getting the sizing. Something I didn't realize until working on this last version of the mock-up is that the 2 cup patterns are different. They are not symmetrical because of this shoulder piece. The way the shoulder piece has to attach to make a smooth transition means that these patterns are different. But I'm pretty happy with this mock-up now. Finally, we move on to fashion fabric. I am tearing up this mock-up yet again, but this time for patterns. I'll be using a satin fabric for the lining and a lot of the outer layer of our top. It's this beautiful purple from Fabric Wholesale Direct. I would also like to add a layer of cotton into the lining layer. I just want a layer of fabric to hand sew things to. I would like to hand sew in some bra cups for this build, and same thing with hand beading if I decide to do that at the end. And while I didn't intend for this to act as a structural layer, the satin is really thin, and I do think that adding this extra layer of cotton really helped add a bit more structure. And I have made an error. So see if you can guess what it is before I tell you, but this is how it looks right now for the lining layer. I have not quite added the shoulder piece yet because I need to hand sew the cups in. Now for the whoopsie, if you have not caught it already. This is a lining layer, which means that it's not actually going to sit like this. It's going to be reversed. And that means the shoulder's on the wrong side. I sewed my lining layer like it was the outside layer, so what I'll need to do is tear out the cups, swap them, and then attach the shoulder. Here's how the lining layer should look, with that cotton layer facing towards us, and the inside is the purple satin fabric. I have also finally added the padding system to my dress form so that everything fits more accurately to how it fits on my body. I think this was one of the main culprits for how much I struggled with the mock-up. But with the lining layer done, we can finally move on to the outside layer and have a discussion about the cartoon logic that is operating with this design. And to save time, I have just sewn together yet another copy of this mock-up so that I have a fresh set of muslin to draw on for our outside mock-up layer. One thing you'll notice is she has the boob with all the ruffles, and that does not have a strap. So that means an unsupported piece of fabric with a lot of weight of ruffles on top of it. So that means structure, right? You can't just have fabric with that many ruffles without a strap, without some sort of structure behind it holding it up. Looking at the other half of the costume though, it looks much more like a stretch leotard. We have conflicting things shown here. A stretch leotard or a structured bodice. Now if you look at some of the other girls, for example Flora or maybe even Stella, this is definitely a corset. This is a structured bodice, which is kind of what led me to take the structured non-stretch route in the beginning. However, the design for Tecna specifically, and I would also say Musa and Aisha, they have all these weird squiggly patterns, which are very hard to pull off in a non-stretch bodice sort of way. The more I looked at screenshots, the worse it got with this cartoon logic. There's one screenshot where her entire back is covered with fabric, even though she only has one sleeve. There were also pictures where the ruffled part of the costume went under her armpit. Like, I'm just gonna have to chalk this up to cartoon logic and move on because there's not really much else to say here. So that means I will be deviating a little bit from the canon shapes because it's not possible. Let's talk a little bit more about the fabric I'm using. Looking at the bodice, there's a lot of different colors going on here. A dark purple, a light purple, a blue, a dark green, and a light green. I got all my fabrics off of Fabric Wholesale Direct for their Cyber Monday sale. It was a great deal, but the thing about online fabric shopping is generally you cannot buy anything less than a yard of fabric. And I did not want to buy an entire yard of fabric for the blue that's in this bodice and nowhere else in the design. So I had an idea. I have a lot of overlay fabrics, various tools and sheer fabrics, and I figured I would just overlay certain fabrics on top of the base satin and it would get me different colors. So the dark purple is the plain purple satin I've been using for everything up till now. The light purple is that same satin, but with a silk chiffon overlay. This is the same fabric I'll be using for the skirt. For the green, I did buy 2 separate green satins, but I am overlaying the light green with this sparkly tulle that I had for my Flora cosplay, just because I like sparkles. And then finally for the blue fabric, I'm using that same purple satin, but with this blue that goes over it. Doing the overlays for certain fabric colors really did help with saving fabric costs, but it does make it a little bit harder to sew because now you have 2 layers of fabric, and sewing the sparkle tulle and the silk chiffon is a bit difficult. And I even added a little tutu skirt from my closet to help get like the vision of how this is coming together. My goal for this weekend is to get all the pattern pieces off the floor. I still have to do the back and the shoulder and the ruffles. But I am going to FanExpo Portland next weekend. I need to start packing, and there are still pieces of Tecna all over my floor. So let's just start with the ruffles. I'm cutting out some bias tape strips, folding them in half, and sewing along the edge to make a tube. Then I'm gonna do a gathering stitch to gather down these tubes into ruffles. I went with 1-inch ruffles, which is pretty small, but looking at the reference, I feel like that was the right choice. It is very densely ruffled. Once that is done, I can add the ruffled part into my bodice. We have a full bodice now, just pinned in the back. It's not perfect, but I think it's good enough, especially given what I had to work with. I think this is fine. When we come back after FanExpo, I will be attaching the outside layer to the lining layer, throwing in the zipper, hemming, really just finishing up the top, and then we can jump into making the skirt. It may have taken me nearly 2 months, but it is done. It is just a little bit loose. You can kind of see just a little bit loose, but I actually prefer that because I am going to be wearing a skirt underneath, and it also gives me more freedom with different undergarments that I can wear under this. There's a bit more space. A lot of the issues I had came out with ironing. A lot of the other issues were fixed just by adding a noodle strap on the other side to add another support point. For the skirt, I am using the McCall's M6994 pattern. And as I started cutting out the skirt layer, I looked a bit closer at the reference, and like with the bodice, it is a bit more complicated than I originally thought. But unlike the bodice, I knew that the skirt was already going to be altered pretty significantly to fit the seated form and be wheelchair accessible. The first thing I did was just make a single skirt layer out of our poly satin with the silk chiffon over it. I am keeping all of the fabric layers as completely independent pieces so that it has a whole lot of fluffiness. Lots of layers. But maybe not quite as many layers as we see in the reference. Miss Tecna has 3 different kind of circle skirt, full skirt layers, and then 2 layers of this side skirt thing. I just know that even if I did put all those layers in, even if I had enough fabric to put all those layers in, you wouldn't really see them all as a wheelchair user. With sitting, the topmost tier is gonna kind of get lost in this bend between like my hips and my torso anyways. So I will just be doing 1 tier of the circle skirt and a side tier. Other modifications. I have made, as you can see, the skirt a little bit longer because when you are sitting in a wheelchair, a short skirt becomes a very short skirt. This is going to be high-waisted when all is said and done, but I still wanted it to come down to about my knees. So with this, I'd say successful test run of our first skirt layer, I'm gonna get busy making some of the other layers. I would also like an opportunity to throw in what little bit I have of that blue tulle in as well, because I noticed her skirt also has a lot of the bluer tones. For hems, I am using a rolled hem on my serger for everything. I just think the rolled hem has a really nice finish, And also silk chiffon is just kind of difficult to double hem, so rolled hem it is. This is still going to have the same sort of construction as that tutu skirt. Everything is going to get gathered into an elastic waistband. There are still a handful of accessories and such we need to discuss before we can get to the final reveal. First, let's talk about the train of that skirt. A very long train on the back, which I have been purposely avoiding until now. The easiest option for this train is to just leave it out entirely. I think there's more than enough going on with this costume. It doesn't need the train, especially as I'll be sitting down and you can't see it very well. But I have one other option that I really want to try. So I have just a rectangle of the silk chiffon. Lay this over the seat of the wheelchair and kind of adjust it so it looks like it's not hanging too close to the caster wheels. It's not going to get stuck. And then I'm going to sit on it. This skirt fabric is not attached to me or the wheelchair in any way. If it catches on something, I should be able to yank it out. It gives the illusion of having a train on the back of the skirt. And I can also adjust the length really easily by just kind of scrunching it up at the back of the seat. I also would like to discuss the leg thingies. So these are just really long bias tape strips of fabric, really wide. It was 4.5-inch strips of bias. I attached all the pieces together, then I sewed them into a tube, flipped it inside out, ironed it, and we have these. Just super long, wide bias strips. I have shoes, by the way, too. These are my Queen Serenity shoes, and I painted them green with some acrylic paint. So the way I've been attaching my leg thingies, thread them through kind of this top part of the shoe, like this, and then I just put the shoe on and wrap it around my legs. As I've mentioned, I'm not really planning to do walking while wearing this costume. I'm going to be wearing it to a con, and I need to use a wheelchair for a con. If you are a person who is planning on walking in these, then I would recommend getting some tights and sewing these straps down to the tights so they do not fall down while you're walking. So this tiara is gorgeous. When I was still fighting the Bodice way back at the start of this build, I realized I might need some help with this costume, and I looked at the reference photos and I was like, what can I pay someone to do for me? And the crown was an obvious option, and I found someone who did an awesome job. Speaking of this build being a lot, we are in the worst case scenario that I foreshadowed in the intro, which doesn't even seem like a bad scenario for me. Like, I'm really happy with the outcome. For the wings, I will be using my Flora wings. I have a tutorial on how I made those wings if you are curious. For the wig, I will be using my season 1 Tecna wig. I also have a video where I style that wig if you are curious. So I won't hold you any longer. Let's get on to the final reveal of probably the first version of my Tecna Harmonix cosplay. If I hold this up like a kite, it'll blow me away. I think it's too windy to do it, but I kind of want to like make a heart with I want to like
You look like you're having fun at least, even if you're cold.
I'm having fun on the inside. Only on the inside. Final thoughts. I'm just really happy I like pulled through and finished this costume because I really wanted to quit multiple times. But I think it looks super cute, and it's also important, like, when I want to quit a costume, to just think like, why am I making this costume? And this costume, I'm not competing it. I'm not judging craftsmanship. I am rolling around a con with my friends dressed as a fairy. Like, that is the purpose of this costume, and I think it does that well. And no promises, but maybe I'll come back with a part 2 video, and I will do all the things I talked about wanting to fix in this video later, because there's a lot of things I'd want to fix. The only other thing I want to say is making the skirt train with just this rectangle of fabric ended up being kind of genius. It was way too windy for this to actually like work as a skirt train, so I just used it like playing in the wind, and I think that was a cool effect. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!